Hi there. Thank you for Women in Product, this opportunity to speak today. It is an honor to be here to talk about the metaverse, share my insights on how we can create a thriving future, harnessing technology, and looking for areas where we can create equality and equity in the metaverse. I want to thank individuals, attendees like you who are here today. Time is money, so the fact that you are here, I very much appreciate it. Please engage with chat, send me questions, let me know your thoughts. I really want this to be interactive so that you get the most out of this session. I'm Pruitt, and I am a tech enthusiast and a strategist. Currently, I'm a senior director in Microsoft's Commerce and Ecosystem organization, and I focus on horizontal strategies to influence and drive impact across our products, across our processes, and then across our people, our culture, if you will. I'm also an advisory board member for Career Climb, where we coach and empower women to reach leadership roles. I also am an advisory board member for Women in Cloud, where we focus on access through network activation, and then also on the policy side by influencing policy and advocating for policy change. My fascination with gadgets, mechanics, problem solving, it's been with me since I was a toddler. And the metaverse represents the intersection, for me, the perfect intersection of these interests. Let me ask you all a question. How many of you this year set a New Year's resolution, a goal for yourself? Raise your hand, put it in chat, right? It's really common, especially at the beginning of the year, but even throughout the year when we want to do something different. It's common to set goals that require us to do something different. Maybe we want to learn a new skill. We want to learn how to code. Maybe we want to learn how to play the guitar. Could be health. We want to work out more, become stronger, more flexible. In order to achieve these goals, we must change our behaviors. We must change our mindsets. And so it's this application, right? If you look at this quote, insanity, doing the same thing over again and expecting different results, we need to take this mindset of changing our behaviors and apply it to the metaverse. Because if we continue to model building and developing out the model of the metaverse on what we've done in the technology industry over the past decades, we can't possibly expect different outcomes when it comes to biases and when it comes to pushback by those who have not historically been included. So it's time now for us to adopt new strategies, those mindsets, creating a more inclusive and equitable metaverse, which brings values and experiences from a broad swath of backgrounds, from traditional tech to non-traditional tech. Because believe it or not, there are so many transferable skills that apply from the non-tech industries into tech. I want to share this quote by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which, yes, it mentions women, but it's also applicable to underrepresented minorities. And you can read it here. I'm not going to read it verbatim. But keep in mind as you're reading it that in the US, women make up 50.8% of the population, but only 28% of the STEM workforce. Looking at underrepresented minorities within the US, 9% of STEM workers compared to 30% of the overall population. If we look at senior leadership roles inside of STEM, women hold 24% of those roles. And among top tech companies, only 2.8% of executives are Black and 3.1% are Hispanic. So we have a way to go, right? Women belong in all locations at the table where decisions are being made. This is true for underrepresented minorities. It applies to business in general, yes, but also for the technology industry. So having that broad, diverse range of talents, backgrounds, it leads to a more robust and impactful process. It leads to more robust and impactful thinking, more creativity, and the outcomes that we can realize are much more impactful. The impact that we realize through the application and adoption of these ideas translates into revenue for those enterprises, but it also creates positive experiences for users and brands. So it's not a 2 + 2 = 4 type of scenario. It's really exponential. And even I would say it's nonsensical in a math type of equation, right? 2 + 2 = 5 million is really what we're looking at. Let me give you an analogy, and I'll use a baking analogy. If more people come to the kitchen bringing an ingredient or contributing to the quantity of the ingredient, not only can we make a bigger pie where everyone gets to enjoy a piece of that pie, but the slice is bigger and we probably have leftovers. That's what I'm talking about when I mentioned the exponential effect. Now, the metaverse itself, it sits in this wider Web 3.0 ecosystem. It includes blockchain, NFT, crypto, and artificial intelligence. And it is going to revolutionize e-commerce. It blends that physical and virtual world, right? So it's no longer this 2D experience. And we're going to see this initially in retail, online shopping. And that gives us a glimpse, an exciting glimpse of the promise of where this tech can go. If we look to the future, Gartner has predicted that by 2026, 25% of people will spend at least 1 hour a day in the metaverse. This could be for personal activities for fun, but it also could be for work. And we'll get into that in a minute. If you search any internet browser, search engine, depending on the resource that you read, you are going to get a list of different leaders, different platforms in the metaverse. I've listed a few here. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail because you can look them up yourselves. There are additional companies. There's Tencent, Unity Software, and Nike. I'll talk about Nike in a bit because they're really interesting. For those who think the metaverse is going away due to recent layoffs, news reports that you've read, I don't believe it, and I would encourage you not to believe it as well. Projections place the metaverse at a 1.3 to 1.5 trillion US dollar market by 2029. That is a CAGR of almost 45%. So when you read these headlines, keep in mind, companies are not truly de-investing in the metaverse. What they are doing is evaluating their strategies and their teams to consolidate and align. And in fact, in times like this, where in combination with cost-saving strategies, investing in emerging technologies is really important and will springboard those tech companies who are investing ahead. It's going to give them a competitive advantage. What isn't talked about much with the metaverse is that there really will be three categories of platforms. There's going to be that consumer platform, which I'm going to talk about the most. This is where we engage in shopping and fun activities. There's also going to be an enterprise version where entities work to operate their day-to-day business. Then we will also have an industrial manufacturing version of the metaverse. And this is where manufacturers, businesses, companies like Nike will have a digital twin to replicate operations, systems, and processes. So using Nike as an example, they'll have a presence in that consumer metaverse, right? That's where we'll engage at a brand level. They'll have an enterprise version where they run their day-to-day business. Then they will have the industrial manufacturing where they manufacture and handle the activities of manufacturing their product. So it's really exciting when you think about those categories. And AI is going to help drive those experiences. So let's dive in there a little bit. AI is the backbone of the metaverse, and it's important to address biases that can arise in its development and their deployment. There's no silver bullet to completely eliminating biases in AI systems. We can use fair-aware machine learning techniques, other tools and processes, right? All of these can minimize the impact of biases. So let me tell you, let's go through a few of the biases and then the aligned techniques that can help to address them. First up is systematic bias. Systematic bias in AI refers to biases that arise from the use of certain demographics or groups of people in the training data. This results in unequal access to opportunities or services for those groups of individuals. Real-world example here, systematic bias in AI could be in instances of loan approval. So in this example, we could have a biased algorithm that might discriminate against certain demographic groups. It might discriminate against women, perhaps people of color, or even maybe age groups. And the result is unequal access to credit, people being denied. So to minimize the impact of systematic bias, we can use debiasing and resampling. Debiasing involves adjusting input data to remove any biases, while resampling involves selecting an equal number of samples from different groups. This ensures a balance. So both of these techniques ensure that the AI system is trained on a diverse and representative set of data. Moving on to automation bias, this refers to the tendencies of individuals to rely too much on automated systems or decision-making algorithms, right? They rely on it to the point that they disregard their own knowledge or experience. And obviously, this can lead to some errors and incorrect decisions because the individuals blindly trust the output of the automated systems. They don't even question it. A real world example here of automated bias, it can be seen in aviation. So here, pilots, they may rely too heavily on autopilot systems, failing to maintain situational awareness, detecting some of those system errors. If we look to the medical field in medical diagnoses, doctors might rely on a computer algorithm to interpret medical images and not independently verify the results. Now, to address automation bias, we have a technique called human in the loop. This technique involves having a human, a person, human in the loop, monitor the automated system and intervene when necessary. This corrects errors, corrects the biases. So we have a human in the loop, and then the automation system, it can be leveraged as a tool to support decision making rather than a replacement for human judgment. Moving on to overfitting and underfitting. These are two common types of biases in machine learning. Overfitting bias occurs when a model becomes too complex. It starts to fit the training data too closely, and it results in poor performance on new unseen data. This can happen when the model is trained on a small amount of data, or perhaps the model has too many features. Let me give you an example here. In the real world, let's say we're trying to predict house prices. So we do that based on a small set of features. It could be square footage, number of bedrooms, perhaps location, right? If the model is too complex and it includes other variables that aren't relevant to house prices, well, then the model may perform well on the training data, but fail to generalize to the new data. On underfitting bias, on the other hand, this occurs when a model is too simple. It fails to capture the underlying patterns in the data. It can happen when the model is too rigid, when there are too few features. An example here of underfitting bias using the same scenario, housing prices. Let's say we're trying to predict housing prices and we're only using the number of bedrooms. Sure, it's very relevant in what the price of a house will be, but it's not the only relevant feature and factor that affects pricing. So in this situation, the model is going to most likely perform poorly on new data. Here, what we can do is use regularization techniques to minimize both overfitting and underfitting. What we do here is we add a penalty term to the model's loss function, that difference between the predicted output of a model and the actual output for any given input. What this does is encourages the model to find a balance between fitting the data well and avoid overfitting. So the regularization penalty is applied equally to all groups in the data, rather than just unfairly penalizing certain groups. Moving to group attribution bias. This occurs when group membership is used to make assumptions or predictions about an individual's characteristics or behavior, leading again to unfair treatment, perhaps discrimination against that particular group, subgroup. A real-world example of group attribution bias is a belief that all members of a particular age group, race, are more likely to commit crimes. This could lead to unfair treatment, harsher punishments for those individuals in that age or race group, say perhaps within the criminal justice system. Using subgroup fairness, we can help to minimize group attribution bias by ensuring decisions are made fairly for each subgroup within the larger group. What we do here is we take into account the unique characteristics and needs of each subgroup, rather than treating everyone as if they are the same. So, using the criminal justice system here, subgroup fairness could involve ensuring that each group or race is treated fairly based on their individual circumstances, rather than making assumptions about their likelihood of committing crimes based on their group membership. Again, remember age and race. So, subgroup fairness here, decision makers can reduce the impact of group attribution bias and make more equitable decisions. Moving to the third to the last, implicit bias. This refers to unconscious attitudes, stereotypes that influence our understanding, our actions, and our decisions. These biases are formed through our past experiences, our upbringing, our cultural, and social environments. They lead to unfair treatment and discrimination against certain groups of people, even when we're not aware that we hold these biases. And again, looking to the real world here for an example of implicit bias, we can use a scenario of a hiring manager who unconsciously prefers candidates who share similar backgrounds. Maybe they grew up in the same area, went to the same schools. They share those backgrounds, those experiences, the education as themselves, and it leads them to perhaps discriminate against candidates who are different because they have this bias preference for candidates who are like them. This is where diverse design teams can help reduce the impact of implicit bias, right? Again, bringing these different perspectives, experiences to the design process, helping to identify and challenge when those implicit biases show up and exist in the design. So when you have that wide group of designers with a wide range of experiences, you're more representative and you tend to be more representative in the process. Overgeneralization bias. This occurs when a model is too confident in its predictions on examples that differ significantly from those in the training data. This can result in poor generalization to new unseen examples. If we're looking at the real world, overgeneralization bias could occur in a computer vision system. Let's say it was trained to identify dogs and photos. If the system was only trained on images of golden retrievers, Labradors, well, it might struggle to identify other breeds. It might struggle to identify wolves, foxes, maybe even incorrectly identify a cat as a dog. So a technique here to minimize the bias is test time data augmentation, and it involves generating new training examples, transforming the data, if you will. In this case, images would be transformed. We could rotate them, crop them, flip them, scale them from the original training data. What this does is simulate variations in the input data that the model wasn't initially exposed to during that training time. So by testing on the augmented data that now reflects some diversity of the population and doesn't disproportionately exclude certain groups, the model becomes more robust, more informed on the different variations in the input. Moving to the last one, selection bias. This is a type of bias that occurs when certain individuals or groups are systematically excluded from a study. This leads to biased results. Now, an example here could be that we want to do a survey about online shopping habits. Well, perhaps that the survey only includes responses from people who regularly shop online. It excludes people who may not have access to the internet, maybe individuals who prefer shopping in physical stores more so than online, or some folks who shop occasionally online. Well, you can see that this doesn't represent the population of potential online shoppers. And the result here is that the sample is biased. It might not accurately reflect the population's online shopping habits or their desires. So here again, having that diverse design team can help minimize selection bias. Again, it ensures that we have this diverse representation of the population. And this can help to minimize that bias, improve the study design so that your output, the results, are more accurate. As I said earlier, there's no silver bullet as it relates to biases. Bias, it's inherent, right? It's part of human decision making, and it's often deeply ingrained in social and cultural norms. it's important to approach the problem of AI bias with a realistic understanding of its complexity, the limitations that exist inside of current technologies as well. Again, this is where having that broad range of talent, viewpoints at the table become a strategic differentiator. I've talked about some opportunities as I gave some examples, but let's dive into a few more concrete opportunities within AI and the teams designing the metaverse. When we think about the metaverse, our first thoughts usually go to engineers, data scientists. And it's true, they are critical in designing the metaverse. However, to have that truly enriching experience, building the metaverse requires a multifaceted approach, which goes beyond coding. It goes beyond data science. We need to have strategists. They are crucial in creating a communication plan, a vision for the metaverse that aligns across business stakeholders, especially at the executive level. We need product managers to write requirements, assess work against the requirements, manage the timelines. UX design I talked about, and they also need to go deeper, addressing STEM subtopics like mental and device fatigue, delving into the psychology of community inclusion and group dynamics. Content moderation is critical. We've learned that from existing social media platforms. And we need to have governance and accountability, both self-governance, self-accountability, and national governance and national accountability. There are very few laws that translate to online spaces, let alone virtual worlds. And we've seen trolling on social media can quickly transpire into physical type of situations. When we immerse our senses and we immerse our bodies in a virtual world, a verbal assault, a physical assault can have real world implications on our minds and our bodies. Let me talk about the desired state of the metaverse. We need to have safety. I've talked about this a bit, but without safety, the metaverse could become a hub for nefarious activities, making it akin to the dark web rather than the internet at large. With the metaverse, we're going to have some exclusive events. There's going to be experiential luxury, but we also need to make sure that along with this exclusivity strategy, right, maybe branding, monetization that companies will do, that there is an expansive free to play opportunity for individuals and businesses. Profitability is crucial. If we don't have profitable and activities, opportunities for businesses, the metaverse is going to evolve into an eclectic enclave of small niche platforms. And so when we look at devices, we need to make sure that we explore how to extend usage, right? Minimize that mental, physical fatigue that leads to headaches, eye strains, so that our users can wear devices longer. They can engage for longer periods of time. And I'm going to jump to durability. Durability is important. The metaverse is going to scale, but we need to make sure that it's durable. It becomes a touchstone of life for rich experiences where people can prosper monetarily and across the senses. How can you contribute to this evolution of the metaverse? First, we can advocate for policies and behaviors to foster inclusivity, discourage groupthink. We can also, in the second category, encourage women and underrepresented minorities to pursue roles in the metaverse. I've talked about a few of those. We need to make sure that we have girls and underrepresented minorities in STEM. Women in STEM jobs earn an average of 28% more than women in non-STEM jobs, and this crosses over into those underrepresented minority categories as well. Thirdly, we can influence both corporate and government policies to build frameworks that build bridges rather than silos. And lastly, we can inspire the creation of a platform that creates an equalized playing field, specifically in buying real estate in the metaverse. And this is where equity comes in. Being able to buy real estate in the metaverse as an individual, as a smaller business, is important. This is where, again, that equity happens that can translate into generational wealth. And when we see small businesses, neighborhood experiences thriving in the metaverse, we know we will have achieved mainstream adoption. All right, in closing, I want to connect with each of you. You can see my LinkedIn details here. I invite you to check out my newly launched newsletter, Rise as a Leader. And I really do want to thank women in product, express my gratitude for the opportunity to speak, and commend them for such an amazing event with too many insightful sessions to mention. And then attendees, again, thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your engagement. I hope it was thought-provoking. And I look forward to connecting and staying in touch with this vibrant community. So thank you very much.